Hello everyone, I'm Anomaly Files, and today I will be showing you guys who the most important and trustworthy figures who are helping with UFO disclosure. I'll be starting with the ones we already know, starting with David Grusch.
Mr. Chairman, ranking members and congressmen, thank you. I'm happy to be here. This is an important issue and I'm grateful for your time. My name is David Charles Grusch. I was an intelligence officer for 14 years, both in the U.S. Air Force, both active duty, Air National Guard, and Reserve, at the rank of major, and most recently from 2021 to 2023, at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, NGA, at the GS-15 civilian level, which is the military equivalent of a full bird colonel. I was my agency's co-lead in Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena and Transmedium Object Analysis, as well as reporting to the UAP Task Force, UAPTF, and eventually, once it was established, the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO. I became a whistleblower through a PPD-19 urgent concern filing in May 2022 with the Intelligence Community Inspector General. Following concerning reports from multiple esteemed and credentialed current and former military and intelligence community individuals that the U.S. government is operating with secrecy above congressional oversight with regards to UAPs. My testimony is based on information I've been given by individuals with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to this country, many of whom also have shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified oral testimony to myself and my various colleagues. I have taken every step I can to corroborate this evidence over a period of 4 years while I was with the UAP Task Force and do my due diligence on the individual sharing it. This is because of these steps, I believe strongly in the importance of bringing this information before you. I am driven by a commitment of both to truth and transparency, rooted in our inherent duty to uphold the United States Constitution and protect the American people. I'm asking Congress to hold our government to this standard and thoroughly investigate these claims. But as I stand here under oath now, I am speaking to the facts as I've been told them. In the U.S. Air Force, in my National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, reservist capacity, I was a member of the UAP Task Force from 2019 to 2021. I served at the NRO Operations Center on the Director's briefing staff, which included the coordination of the Presidential Daily Brief and supporting a variety of contingency operations, which I was the Reserve Intelligence Division Chief backup. In 2019, the UAP Task Force Director asked me to identify all special access programs and controlled access programs, also known as SAPs and CAPs, we needed to satisfy our congressionally mandated mission, and we were direct report at the time to the DepSecDef. At the time, due to my extensive executive level intelligence support duties, I was cleared to literally all relevant compartments and in a position of extreme trust, both in my military and civilian capacities. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program, to which I was denied access to those additional read-ons when I requested it. I made the decision, based on the data I collected, to report this information to my superiors and multiple inspectors general, and in effect becoming a whistleblower. As you know, I've suffered retaliation for my decision, but I am hopeful that my actions will ultimately lead to a positive outcome of increased transparency. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Another important figure in ufology to help with disclosure is Lue Elizondo, the former director of ATIP. He recently came out with a book called Imminent, which was approved by DOPSR, the Pentagon's pre-publication review. So he's another whistleblower. Here, take a look.
Foes. Your book title is Imminent. Something is about to happen. What's about to happen?
Well, if we're lucky, disclosure. The realization that the U.S. government is aware that the topic of UAPs is not only valid, but they're real.
The book lays out in vivid detail allegations that the United States military has been running a UAP retrieval and reverse engineering program for years and has even recovered alien bodies. Aliens, non-human intelligences, are real and they have been engaging with humanity.
Ross, we're not alone. We are not alone in this universe, and it is a simple fact. And the U.S. government has been aware of that fact now for decades.
The American public, the entire planet, is being lied to by the American government about what's really going on.
I think if the American public knew just how deep this lie went, that we would have a very significant constitutional crisis on our hands.
Why should you believe any of this? And who is this Elizondo character anyway? Well, it depends on whom you ask.
Very hardworking, very diligent, intelligent, and patriotic.
He is just a normal guy who is trying to do something extraordinary.
What defines Lue Elizondo?
Loyalty, transparency, honesty.
Karl Nell is another prominent figure in UAP disclosure. He's another former director of another UAP task force, just called the UAP Task Force, or UAPTF. He was David Grusch's boss, and he came out recently saying that non-human intelligence exists and is here and is ongoing, and that there's unelected people in government that know this. He spoke about this during the SALT conference, and he also spoke about it during the Soul Foundation, talking about the Schumer's UAP Disclosure Act. Here is Karl Nell.
So, Karl, maybe to begin, can you share a little bit about your background, who you are, and perhaps why people should care what you say?
Sure. Well, thanks, Alex. It's a pleasure and honor to be here, and it's a fantastic event, and I'm glad to see a large bunch of folks that stuck it out to the end for this talk. So I was fortunate. I had a 4-year ROTC scholarship to Penn. I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. The Army sent me overseas to do signal corps engineering projects, so I did a lot of strategic comm projects in Europe. I ended up working in Army Space Command. I commanded a satellite ground station, war trace to the Joint Chiefs. I spent some time at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The Army ultimately sent me to get a master's in mechanical engineering, a master's in strategic studies, graduate work in computer science. I was on track to stay in, but I decided that I wanted to pursue more of a technical career. So I got out and ended up working at Bell Labs, which was a fantastic place. Unfortunately, I was there during the trivestiture that folks may be familiar with, where the company got split up. I left Bell Labs and ended up working in Lockheed Missiles and Space. I worked at Northrop Grumman. I've ran strategic technology programs in the defense industry, worked for as a deputy chief of staff or deputy CTO for a $2 billion company. I was a vice president general manager of a Northern Virginia-based R&D firm. I stayed in the military, in the reserve. I commanded at every grade level through brigade. I was fortunate to stand up the Army's newest expeditionary MI brigade. I was the deputy chief of staff for a combatant command. Ultimately, this experience sort of combined to give me the opportunity to come in and advise Army Futures Command, the largest reorganization in the Army Reserve since really 1973, on how the Army could be more effective. And my last assignment was involved with the UAP Task Force, which maybe is the most apropos for this discussion.
And so, Karl, here's the million-dollar question. Do you believe that a higher form of non-human intelligence has visited this planet?
Right. So non-human intelligence exists. Non-human intelligence has been interacting with humanity. This interaction is not new, and it's been ongoing. And there are unelected people in the government that are aware of that.
And so, Karl, that is quite a bold statement. I'm wondering, and I'm curious, how confident are you that that is true?
There's zero doubt.
And Karl, what evidence have you seen? What was the moment where you developed this level of conviction? Because what you're saying is extremely consequential and very important. And I know that a lot of people here, even perhaps, may not believe that statement.
Right. Well, probably a better way to ask that is, how can the folks in the audience come to the, a common understanding of what this phenomenon is? And so there's sort of two tracks here. One is from first principles, and another is actually from the data. So let's take a look at the data. So we can look at some folks that have very high level access to information, like Paul Hellyer, who was the defense chief for Canada, has come out and said the same thing. We can look at Ham Eshed, the head of Israel's, or former head of Israel's Space Force, has said the same thing. Chris Mellon, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Intel, SAPCO, has essentially said the same thing. Lue Elizondo has said the same thing. David Grusch has said the same thing. David Grusch cleared for presidentially level material. So you're looking at people that are in a position to know this, and they're telling you the same thing. You could take a look at the Gang of Eight in the Senate and in Congress. So there's two members of the Gang of Eight, Marco Rubio and Senator Chuck Schumer, that signed up to the UAP disclosure amendment last year that basically said they're not being told the truth, and we need to push forward on that.
Hal Puthoff is another important figure for UAP disclosure. Hal Puthoff is a physicist and a researcher for his known work in parapsychology and space science. He helped fund remote viewing at Stanford Research Institute in the 1970s. Puthoff has also contributed to the studies of zero-point energy and advanced propulsion technologies. Supposedly, he is far in the know on this topic. Here, take a look.
Now, along the way, something that came across my path in this was that I was contacted by a CEO of a think tank in Washington, D.C. This is back a couple of decades ago. He says, I want you to come and participate in a conference here in Washington. I said, well, frankly, I'm too busy. What's it about? He says, I can't tell you what it's about, but if you come and you participate, you will consider it later to be one of the most important conferences you ever been to. Well, since I had respect for him and knew his background and many things he's done, I did finally decide to come to this conference. And when I arrived, there were about, 15, 20 people. I recognized some of them from the military, from CIA, DIA, some businessmen, and so on. So I thought, well, this is quite an interesting group of people. And so, to start the conference off, he said, this conference is about disclosing something to the American public. As a startup position, let's assume that there have been crash retrievals by Russia, China, and the United States. And the question is, can we bring this out to the public? And so I think I, and most of the people I knew, when you talked to them later, said, oh, this is really cool. I mean, this could really go someplace. So he said, okay, the strategy we're going to use is we're going to make a list of all the areas that you think would be affected by this. And then on each one, you're going to have to grade them on a scale from +9 to -9 as to the level of impact and whether it's positive or negative. Okay, so we started out by making lists. So we started out with the obvious things. Well, I mean, the stock market, maybe religions. Well, certainly politics would be affected. So we made a long list. I mean, it was really a long list. And the time we got down to the bottom of the list, we were really in the weeds. Like, okay, if corporation A has access to retrieve materials that corporation B doesn't, then when this comes out, corporation B is going to sue corporation A, they're going to sue the government. This is really going to be a tough thing to kind of handle. So, okay. So So anyway, we broke up into groups. He's taking a certain number of the things that were in our list. Okay. And in my group, we added up the numbers, +9 to -9, and we ended up in the negative category, even though we were kind of positively disposed to the idea. So I thought, well, maybe that just has to do with the particular list that we got. So then I talked to other people that were on other lists and said, you know, we came to a negative number also. Well, make a long story short, it turned out that everybody going through these lists, it was a very sophisticated situation.
Eric Davis is another important figure in ufology. Eric Davis is a physicist and a researcher known for his work on advanced propulsion concepts, including anti-gravity and wormholes. He also wrote the Eric Davis Memo, which reportedly details a conversation about UFO crash retrieval programs. Eric Davis has worked for OSAP, the Pentagon's UFO program, that studied UFOs. He has also written papers on exotic technologies, including faster-than-light travel and the science behind potential UFO propulsion systems. Here, take a look.
What kind of stuff did you do for the Pentagon UFO program?
Oh, basically, what I just discussed was we had, well, first of all, we gave technical advice to the field investigation. We'd get information in, data on reports, and we would do physics analysis and report back on what our opinion or assessments on the field investigations and data was on a variety of observations and encounters of UFO phenomenon. But one big main part of our work was to hire 38 independent expert scientists in industry, academia, and government to write defense intelligence reference documents on future transformation concepts for concepts that we can envision in the year 2050 and take what we have in our existing really advanced physics and really advanced aerospace technology and evolve it to the future of 2050 and see what it looks like and see if we can compare, see if we have any hopes of developing an advanced technology in 2050 that's comparable to the Tic Tac UFOs that the USS Nimitz and Roosevelt encountered and the other type of UFOs that the other naval warships have encountered out in the Middle East and elsewhere around the Pacific and Atlantic.
Okay, so you said that part of your job at OSAP, right? OSAP?
Yeah, OSAP.
OSAP was you would get reports and you guys would study and analyze the physics behind those reports. What kind of reports are you talking about?
One was a Navy laser weapon report about the development of the breakthroughs in solid-state laser weapon technology. Another one was a paper I co-authored as a second author on extra space dimensional warp drive. So the lead author got his PhD in physics at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, on looking at extra space dimensions and drawing on vacuum energy, quantum vacuum energy from the extra dimensions to power a warp drive. So we co-authored a paper. Then I wrote as a single author a paper on traversable wormholes, and then I wrote a paper on how to explore the quantum vacuum to produce negative vacuum energy that you would need to create a wormhole in a warp drive. And then I authored a paper on anti-gravity propulsion physics using general relativity, because all that is all wrapped up into the same physics. Other people talked about smart materials, nanomaterials, MHD aerospace propulsion systems, hypersonic propulsion, invisibility cloaks using metamaterials.
Dr. Garry Nolan is a professor of pathology at Stanford University School of Medicine, known for his work in immunology and cancer research. In recent years, he has gained recognition for his interest in unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAPs. Garry Nolan has analyzed physical samples related to UAP encounters, shown at the Sol Foundation, which he created later, including alleged materials from unidentified craft. This is why he funded the Sol Foundation, a better and more structured way to research UAPs. The Foundation's mission focuses on fostering a scientific framework for investigating these phenomena, and adding more transparency and peer review in collaboration with other professionals. Take a look at Garry Nolan.
Our operations being set up to make parallel retrieval teams that have nothing to do with the government to get there first. Okay. And hopefully not engage yourself in a firefight. But, they have the means to get there first. Let's just put it that way.
I think the best way to kick it off, given what we're going to be talking about, is if you could discuss the Soul Foundation, what it is and how you came to be involved with it.
So the Soul Foundation is an academic organization whose intent is to legitimize the conversation in a professional manner, not to make any claims about what UAP or non-human intelligences are or might be, but to basically create a place where academics can come and ask the kinds of questions that academics and professionals want to ask. They want to have a what if question rather than a there is question. And so the issue is that society in general looks to academics, for better or worse, as the people who will talk about the kinds of questions that matter to them, and will provide, at the very least for policymakers in government or commercial organizations, the wargaming questions and answers that might affect human society at large. And the output of such an organization and an output of any academic organization, frankly, are published papers that are peer-reviewed. And it's not because peer review legitimizes the answer, but peer review legitimizes the methodology by which potential answers or conclusions are come to, so that somebody else who might be looking at, well, how did you analyze this, can go back to the paper and say, oh, well, here's the methods you used, here's the data you used to come to this conclusion. I might disagree with your conclusion, but at least I know that the data and the methods that you use to come to your conclusion are reasonable, so that other people can reproduce it. But more so, it's because, again, for better or worse, both government and society at large look to academics to spend the time asking the questions that matter to humanity at large. And so we've done that already now with a couple of papers and white papers that we've put out, and other papers that we're putting out in the future around what is it that government needs to do about this? What is it that we need to do from the standpoint of the military to protect either pilots or individuals or commercials, commercial airlines for the matter. I just got off the line with somebody who's the head of a major healthcare organization in the United States to talk with him about mental health issues around this, because there are people who, for instance, feel that they've seen something and they suffer what you can think of as a double trauma. They both are suffering and dealing with the issue of having seen something that they don't understand. And then when they try to relay that to friends and family, they're called crazy. Or they're accused of being, having a mental health issue. So there's nobody that they can go to talk to. And we know that that's the worst case that one should ever have when you're trying to relay an experience that you've had. From my personal standpoint, I got involved in this because somebody came to me, some people from the government came to me to ask for my help to look at medical harm that had come to some individuals around this matter. And they didn't come to me because I had any special experience in UAP or the phenomena. They were doing complete medical workups on this cohort of individuals, about 100 individuals from the military and the defense establishment and the IC and diplomatic corps. And they'd asked around and they said, well, we want to do blood analysis for inflammatory events. Who's the best person we can talk to? And they said, well, you got to go talk to this guy Nolan at Stanford. He has the world's most advanced instrument for looking at blood and giving you a detailed report on these things. And that's when they showed up in my office and asked me for my help. And
David Fravor is a retired U.S. Navy commander and a former fighter pilot. He is best known for his 2004 encounter with a now famous Tic Tac UFO off the coast of California, or UAP. During his service, Fravor was a commanding officer of the Black Aces Squadron and a highly experienced pilot with decades of military flight experience. So here's David Fravor with his Tic Tac experience.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Congressmen, Congresswomen. I want to first thank you for the invitation to speak to the committee on the UAP topic that has been in the news for the past 6 years and seems to be continuing to gain momentum. As you know, my name is David Fravor. I'm a retired commander in the United States Navy. In 2004, I was a commanding officer of Strike Fighter Squadron 41, the world-famous Black Aces. We were attached to Carrier Wing 11, stationed on board the USS Nimitz, and had begun a 2-month workup cycle off the coast of California. On this day, we were scheduled for a 2v2 air-to-air training with the USS Princeton as our control. When we launched off Nimitz, my wingman was joining up. We were told that the training was going to be suspended and we were going to proceed with real-world tasking. As we proceeded to the west, the air controller was counting down the range to an object that we were going to, and we were unaware of what we were going to see when we arrived. The controller had told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space. We arrived at the location at approximately 20,000 feet in a controller called merge plot, which means that our radar blip was now in the same resolution cell as the contact. As we looked around, we noticed that we saw some whitewater off our right side. It's important to note that the weather on this day was as close to perfect as you could ask for off the coast of San Diego. Clear skies, light winds, calm seas, no whitecaps from waves. So the whitewater stood out in a large blue ocean. All 4 of us, because we were in F-18Fs, so we had pilots and Wizzo in the back seat, looked down saw a white tic-tac object with a longitudinal axis pointing north-south and moving very abruptly over the water like a ping-pong ball. There were no rotors, no rotor wash, or any sign of visible control surfaces like wings. As we started clockwise towards the object, my Wizzo and I decided to go down and take a closer look with the other aircraft staying in high cover to observe both us and the tic-tac. We proceeded around the circle about 90 degrees from the start of our descent, and the object suddenly shifted its longitudinal axis, aligned it with my aircraft, and began to climb. We continued down another 270 degrees, nose low, where the tic-tac, or we considered 270 degrees to where, and we went nose low to where the tic-tac would have been. Our altitude at this point was about 15,000 feet, and the tic-tac was about 12,000. As we pulled nose onto the object, within about a half mile of it, it rapidly accelerated in front of us and disappeared. Our wingmen, roughly 8,000 feet above us, lost contact also. We immediately turned back to see where the whitewater was at, and it was gone also. So as we started to turn back towards the east, the controller came up and said, "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but that thing is at your cat point, roughly 60 miles away in less than a minute. You can calculate the speed." We returned to Nimitz. We were taking off our gear. We were talking to one of my crews that was getting ready to launch. We mentioned it to him, and they went out and luckily got the video that you see, that 90-second video. What you don't see is the radar tape that was never released, and we don't know where it's at, of the active jamming that the object put on an APG-73 radar, and I can get into modes later if you're interested. What is shocking to us is that the incident was never investigated. None of my crew were ever questioned. Tapes were never taken, and after a couple days, it turned into a great story with friends. It wasn't until 2009 till Jay Stratton had contacted me to investigate. Unbeknownst to all, he was part of the ATIP program in the Pentagon led by Lue Elizondo. And there was an unofficial official report that came out that's now on the internet. Years later, I was contacted by the other pilot, Alex Dietrich, and asked if I'd been contacted, and I said no, but I'm willing to talk. I was contacted by Mr. Elizondo, and we talked for a short period of time, and he said we'd be in contact. A few weeks after that, I was made aware that Lue had left the Pentagon in protest and joined forces with Tom DeLonge, Chris Mellon, Steve Justice, and others to form Two Stars Academy, an organization that pressed the issue with leading industry experts and U.S. government officials. They worked with Leslie Kean, who is present today, Ralph Blumenthal, and Helene Cooper to publish the articles in the New York Times 2017 New York Times. And it removed the stigma on the topic of UFOs, which is why we're here today. Those articles open the door for the government and public that cannot be closed. It has led to an interest from our elected officials who are not focused on little green men, but figuring out where these craft are, where they're from, the technology they possess, how do they operate. It also led to the Whistleblower Protection Act and the NDAA. There are multiple witnesses coming forward to say that have firsthand knowledge, and Mr. Grusch just covered that. What concerns me is that there's no oversight from our elected officials on anything associated with our government processing or working on craft. Believe it not from this world. This issue is not a full public disclosure that could undermine national security, but it is about ensuring that our system of checks and balances works across all work done in the government using taxpayer funds. Relative to government programs, even unacknowledged wave programs have some level of oversight by the appropriate committee members in the House and Senate, and this work that is said to be occurring from whistleblower testimonies should not be exempt. In closing, I would like to say that the Tic Tac object we engaged in 2004 was far superior to anything that we had on time, have today, or are looking to develop in the next 10 years. If we in fact have programs that possess this technology, it needs to have oversight from those people that the citizens of this great country elected in office to represent what is best for the United States and best for the citizens. I thank you for your time. Thank you very much.
Is an astrophysicist and professor at Harvard University, known for his groundbreaking work in UAP research and extraterrestrial life. He gained significant attention for his views and findings on Oumuamua, a mysterious interstellar object that passed through the solar system in 2017, making weird maneuvers. Avi Loeb is also the head of the Galileo Project, an initiative at Harvard focused on scientifically investing in UAPs and the science for extraterrestrial technology. This is Avi Loeb.
Stellar, it came from outside to the sun's gravity. And so we concluded it's interstellar, it came from outside the solar system. Could it be a Voyager-like meteor? Imagine our own spacecraft colliding with a planet like Earth. In the future, it would appear as a meteor of unusual material strength and unusual speed, which are exactly the properties of this meteor from 2014. And then Oumuamua was discovered in 2017. And finally, a comet appeared, also from interstellar space, was moving too fast. And so my colleagues argued, well, this one looks familiar. Doesn't it convince you that the others are natural in origin? Rocks of a type that we've never seen before? And I say, if I go down the street and I see a weird person, and after that I see a normal person, it doesn't make the weird person normal. Now, the US Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, delivered 3 reports to the US Congress talking about unidentified anomalous phenomena. The good news is the sky is not classified. We don't need to wait for the US government to tell us what lies outside the solar system. Their day job is national security. My day job is figuring out what lies beyond the solar system. And the sky is not classified. We can answer the question ourselves. So I'm leading the Galileo project. We built an observatory at Harvard University that monitors the sky 24/7, looking for objects that are not familiar, not birds, balloons, drones, airplanes, satellites. So far, we monitored 500,000 objects, haven't found anything unusual yet, but we keep looking. We are using machine learning software to figure out what we are looking at. But the most exciting endeavor that I was involved in is an expedition to the Pacific Ocean near Papua New Guinea to look for the materials from this meteor that I described before. And the US Space Command issued a letter to NASA confirming at the 99.999% that this object indeed originated from outside the solar system based on its high speed. It was moving faster than 95% of all stars in the vicinity of the sun. It exploded in the lower atmosphere, about 90 kilometers away from Manus Island in Papua New Guinea. And that meant that the object had material strength tougher than even iron meteorites. And so I led an expedition in June 2023. You can see the team on the ship that was fittingly called Silver Star. And we used a sled with magnets on both sides to search for droplets left over from the explosion of this meteor. And at the bottom left, you see the filming crew of Netflix that are preparing a documentary about this research. And the director asked me, Avi, it looks like you are running, because I was jogging at sunrise, as I often do on land, for a few miles. And he said, are you running away from something or towards something? And I said, both. I'm running away from some of my colleagues who have strong opinions without seeking evidence. And I'm running towards a higher intelligence in interstellar space.
H.R. Mcmaster is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General and former National Security Advisor under President Donald Trump from 2017 to 2018. Throughout his career, Mcmaster was known for his expertise in military strategy and national security. Recently, Mcmaster made headlines during an appearance on Real Time with Bill Maher, where he stated his knowledge on UAPs and how he knows they exist and how credible people see them and we don't know what they are. This is Mcmaster.
Illegal aliens. I mean the really illegal ones, the ones from outer space.
That's what my daughters want to know about. They're like, hey, you're a national security advisor, you know.
No. Years ago when there were sightings of UFOs, it was some farmer in the middle of nowhere. Okay, now it's Navy personnel.
Right.
Who say, look, we see this thing and we cannot explain it.
Right.
Look, you're a military man. I'm sure you have drinks with military people, just like I have drinks with comedians. You talk shop. You guys must talk about this. What's going on?
That's my next book, Bill. I can't talk about it. No. I'm telling you, this is my daughter's work. My daughter's always pumping me for information. Okay, I know you know about the aliens.
Well, I mean, here's my theory, is that the president would have to know, when you got into office, if there was Area 51 and this was going on, they would have to inform the president. Trump was president. He would have blabbed it by now.
Yeah.
But what do you think? What are those things we're
Well, I mean, there are things you can't explain. I mean, there are things that cannot be explained.
Wow.
And so I don't know what the explanation is for those unexplainable things, but I will say that there are phenomena that have been witnessed by multiple people that are just inexplicable by any kind of, the science available to us.
Well, let's hope your fourth tour of duty doesn't have to be Mars. Thank you very much, General. I appreciate you coming here. Good luck with your book.
James Lacaktski is a former intelligence officer for the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, or the DIA. He was directly involved with examining advanced aerospace phenomena as a part of a government program focused on UAPs. James Lacaktski had first-hand experience with a UAP craft. The government reportedly managed to breach the hull of this craft, gaining access to its interior. Inside, Lacaktski and his team observed advanced non-human technology and design, features like anything unknown to humanity. He is crucial to disclosure and needs to be subpoenaed. This is James Lacaktski.
You're officially allowed to tell us that the United States government has in its possession a craft of unknown origin and you were able to access the inside. Is that correct?
The wording that you read is correct. You're going beyond the wording.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you, did that meeting happen? And is it true? And it's true.
Yes.
Okay, so you're telling us, you told us, because you were allowed to tell us, that our government has a UFO in its possession and has been able to access the inside of it, right?
Yes.
Well, that's what
I was allowed to tell you. Let me show the back of the book. This is.
I know. But hold up, George. Will you translate, George?
All right, let's try another tack. How do we know it's a craft and not a doorstop? We accessed it. It has no engine. It has no wings. No fuel. It doesn't. We don't know that it travels. Do we know it's a craft or it's just a rock?
George, you're going into the further discussion that occurred that day.
All right.
We can't go there. But let me tell you, we're going to try to cover that in the future. But it's delicate. It makes the technology described in here look primitive.
Why is it delicate? Why is this topic that the United States government has a UFO in its possession and we've been reverse engineering it? You've admitted it. Why is it delicate?
The details. I'm old school. I won't use the term adversary, competitor as the way we describe. We are surrounded, maybe not surrounded, but hopefully not so, by our enemies. And our enemies, you can be sure they're listening to this show right now. You can be sure that they were monitoring OSAP. You can be sure that perhaps they had employees, hopefully not in GIA, but in the contractor part, were giving out information. I know that. So the thing is we can't say anything more than what we've been approved to say.
Ryan Graves is a former U.S. Navy fighter pilot who gained attention for his testimony to Congress about UAPs. He described witnessing UAPs on radar and how other pilots see them every single day. They see them during training missions and express concerns about their potential threat to aviation safety. Graves also mentioned knowing over 30 other pilots who have reported similar UAP sightings, such as a sphere within a cube. These need serious investigations. This is Ryan Graves.
Thank you. Chairman Grothman, Ranking Member Garcia, distinguished members of the House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security, Representatives Burchett and Luna. My name is Ryan Fobbs Graves, and I am a former F-18 pilot with a decade of service in the U.S. Navy, including 2 deployments in Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Inherent Resolve. I have experienced advanced UAP firsthand, and I'm here to voice the concerns of more than 30 commercial aircrew and military veterans who have confided their similar encounters with me. Today, I would like to highlight 3 critical issues that demand our action. As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena. The stigma attached to UAP is real and powerful and challenges national security. It silences commercial pilots who fear professional repercussions, discourages witnesses, and is only compounded by recent government claims questioning the credibility of eyewitness testimony. Parts of our government are aware of more about UAP than they let on, but excessive classification practices keep crucial information hidden. Since 2021, all UAP videos are classified as secret or above. This level of secrecy not only impedes our understanding, but fuels speculation and mistrust. In 2014, I was an F-18 Foxtrot pilot in the Navy Fighter Attack Squadron 11, the Red Rippers, and I was stationed at NAS Oceana in Virginia Beach. After upgrades were made to our jet's radar systems, we began detecting unknown objects operating in our airspace. At first, we assumed they were radar errors, but soon we began to correlate the radar tracks with multiple onboard sensors, including infrared systems, eventually through visual ID. During a training mission in Warning Area Whiskey 72, 10 miles off the coast of Virginia Beach, 2 F-18 Super Hornets were split by a UAP. The object, described as a dark gray or a black cube inside of a clear sphere, came within 50 feet of the lead aircraft and was estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter. The mission commander terminated the flight immediately and returned to base. Our squadron submitted a safety report, but there was no official acknowledgement of the incident and no further mechanism to report the sightings. Soon, these encounters became so frequent that aircrew would discuss the risk of UAP as part of their regular pre-flight briefs. Recognizing the need for action and answers, I founded Americans for Safe Aerospace. The organization has since become a haven for UAP witnesses who were previously unspoken due to the absence of a safe intake process. More than 30 witnesses have come forward, and almost 5,000 Americans have joined us in the fight for transparency at safeaerospace.org. The majority of witnesses are commercial pilots at major airlines. Often, they are veterans with decades of flying experience. Pilots are reporting UAP at altitudes that appear above them at 40,000 feet, potentially in low Earth orbit or in the gray zone below the Kármán line, making inexplainable maneuvers like right-hand turns and retrograde orbits or J-hooks. Sometimes these reports are reoccurring, with numerous recent sightings north of Hawaii and in the North Atlantic. Other veterans are also coming forward to us regarding UAP encounters in our airspace and oceans. The most compelling involve observations of UAP by multiple witnesses and sensor systems. I believe these accounts are only scratching the surface, and more will share their experiences once it is safe to do so. In closing, I recognize the skepticism surrounding this topic. If everyone could see the sensor and video data I witnessed, our national conversation would change. I urge us to put aside stigma and address the security and safety issue this topic represents. If UAP are foreign drones, it is an urgent national security problem. If it is something else, it is an issue for science. In either case, unidentified objects are concerned for flight safety. The American people deserve to know what is happening in our skies. It is long overdue. Thank you.
John Kirby is a retired U.S. Navy admiral and served as the National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications at the White House. In this role, he acted as a spokesperson on matters of national security, foreign policy, and defense, helping communicate the Biden administration's positions on key global issues. Prior to this, he served as the Pentagon press secretary under the Obama administration and has a prominent voice in both military and government communications. He recently spoke about UAPs. This is John Kirby.
Does the United States believe that there may be life outside of Earth?
I don't have a position on that one way or the other to speak to today. What we believe is that there are unexplained aerial phenomena that have been cited and reported by pilots, Navy and Air Force, that these phenomena have, in some cases, had an impact on our training ranges, on our pilots' ability to fly, train, operate, and stay ready. That alone makes it a national security issue worth looking at. We don't know. We don't have the answers about what these phenomena are. Otherwise, I guess we'd have a catchier name for it. Unexplained, unidentified aerial phenomena doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but it's an honest assessment of what we think about this problem set. And so we'll see where it goes.
I wonder if the president believes that these claims warrant further investigation. Do you guys see some of these claims and allegations as credible?
If the president didn't believe that the sightings by pilots were serious enough to be considered, he wouldn't have wanted the Pentagon to stand up an office to look at this, to analyze the data, to collect reports, to provide a system by which we can collate the information and better figure out what we've got here. But that work's ongoing. So if your question is, do we think we need to be transparent with the American people? Of course we need to be as transparent as we can be. But the truth is, Jeremy, we don't have hard and fast answers on these things.
Barack Obama is one of the most credible people to have addressed the UAP issue seriously in interviews. He acknowledged that unidentified objects have been observed by military personnel and that they need to be investigated. He stated the importance of understanding these sightings for national security while refraining from speculating on their origin. This is Barack Obama.
There's footage and records of objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. We can't explain how they moved, their trajectory, and so I think that people still take seriously trying to investigate and figure out what that is.
Donald Trump, the 45th U.S. president, briefly addressed UFOs during an interview on Logan Paul's podcast. While he acknowledged the public's curiosity, he spoke about the topic with some skepticism, saying he doesn't really believe. But he has had some pilots come to him with interesting information. He also talked about Roswell in an interesting interview with his son. This is Donald Trump.
There are two questions I have to ask
Go
you.
ahead.
The first one's kind of fun. Aliens. I want to talk to you about aliens.
Yeah.
UFOs, UAPs.
I know.
The disclosure we've seen in Congress
Yeah.
recently. It's confusing and upsetting a lot of Americans because there's something happening. There are unidentified aerial phenomena in the sky. We don't know what they are. Do you?
So it's such a question I do get a lot, and it's such an interesting question. I've met with pilots that look just like you, actually. Okay, they have more of a crew cut. Okay, they look like him and they look like you. Some of them look like you,
a little fatter.
But these are perfect people.
Okay,
and they're not
crazy.
Conspiratorial. They're not crazy.
Yeah.
And they tell me stories that they've seen things that you wouldn't believe. These are not people that you would say, "Gee,
no way.
oh, that's
There's no
okay."
way. President of the United States.
But
I said, was
who
your
is
phone
it? That's
silent?
Joe Biden wanting to do an interview. So I've met with pilots like beautiful Tom Cruise, but taller.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
handsome, perfect people. Sir, there was something there that was round in form and going like 4 times faster than my super jet fighter plane. And I look at these guys, and they really mean it.
Yeah.
And am I a believer? No, I can't say I am. But I have met with people that are serious people that say there's some really strange things that they see flying around out there. And, if you go to Nevada and you look at that little section of where they go to look at the aliens, where they think all the aliens are landing, that, it's I think it's maybe the number one tourist attraction in the United States.
Roswell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roswell.
Before you leave office, will you let us know if there's aliens? Because this is the only thing I really want to know. I want to know what's going on. Would you ever open up Roswell and let us know what's really going on there?
So many people ask me that question.
I know it sounds almost ridiculous, but it's actually the real question I want to know.
It sounds like a cute question, but it's actually, there are millions and millions of people that want to go there, that want to see it. I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. But Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
So you're saying you may declassify?
Oh.
You'll take it?
Well, I'll have to think about that one, right? I'll have to think.
All right.
John Mack was a Harvard psychiatrist who became well known for his research into UFOs and alien abductions. He explored the spiritual aspects of people claiming to have experienced alien encounters, treating them seriously rather than dismissing their stories as hallucinations or mental illnesses. His work brought credibility to the study of alien abductions. This is John Mack.
I'm bubbling with questions to ask you, but the first one that I want to come back to, you use the word spacecraft. How would they or you know that what they saw was actually a spacecraft?
Often the person has not actually seen the spacecraft, but often they have. A number of these cases, when they're floated through the wall of their home, through the window, through the door, again, this, so many of the details of these experiences make no sense in our kind of the Newtonian, Cartesian, Western, whatever you want to call it, notions of reality, and yet the stories are consistently described with again, the self-critical attitude that the people have, and they may see a typical unidentified flying object, a saucer-shaped or cigar-shaped vehicle on the ground of their home, emanating bright lights, or they may be taken by a small craft up into the sky to a kind of mothership, which they see very clearly. So many of them actually see the UFOs that and the insides are so uniformly described with rounded, curved walls and complicated instrument panels that it's become clear that it's some kind of craft in the sky, which they would naturally call a spacecraft.
I think people would naturally draw that inference, but to me it's still an inference. I think you might agree, we don't really know exactly what these things are.
I mean, fair enough. I mean, you could have, as we do have, very this gets really into the way of how we know anything, but or our use of language. But we call something which is seen in the sky and which seems to be moving from one place to another, we call it a spacecraft. Now, again, this has to do with where our own technology has come to. It could be created as a virtual reality and is similar, appears similar to what we already know as airplane or a certain type of aerospace vehicle, so we call it a spacecraft. But again, you know, if you want to get down to the very core of the way language structures reality for us, you could even question whether they're spacecraft.
Isn't it the case that you've described in your book cases that were reported, let's say 100 years ago, back in the 19th century, of people who talked about airships?
Well, the article's there by Jerome Clark, who's been a student of the UFO phenomenon for many years, and he went back and looked into the newspaper accounts of the airship craze of the last decade of the 19th century, and many of those vehicles would look kind of like balloons or looked like the technology of the time, but he went further than that. He actually did an exhaustive search of all of the photographs he could find and the descriptions, and lo and behold, many of them did appear very much like the current modern day UFO, but the people of the time did not have in our culture the technological knowledge to actually see them as what they were. So he's concluded that these were probably UFOs not so different from what we're seeing now, but our perceptual development hadn't reached the point where they could be perceived the way we now can see things in the sky more or less as we at least think they are.
Right.
And again, you're raising the question whether even that's actual or constructed reality.
Kevin Knuth is a former NASA scientist and an associate professor of physics at the University at Albany. He has an interesting and credible background in both academia and aerospace, with over 2 decades of research in theoretical physics and quantum mechanics. He recently started working for the Sol Foundation, which does scientific research and studies on UAPs, or Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena. This is Kevin Knuth.
And it's rather surprising to me that these scientists believe that we know our physics, when it is widely admitted that we don't know physics. We don't have a quantum theory of gravity. We don't. And we know that quantum mechanics makes a difference. Quantum mechanics makes a difference with Maxwell's equations and electromagnetism. That's what makes this thing work. You would assume that quantum mechanics will probably make a difference with gravity as well. And you might be able to do some spectacular things with that. But then again, waving the cell phone around, we know our physics. The cell phone is not physics. I don't know if most scientists know this yet or not. It's not physics, it's engineering. It's a triumph of engineering. And engineering is the act of using physics to find workarounds to problems. And unfamiliar engineering can look a whole lot like anomalous physics. So I am not ready to immediately jump to the conclusion that there's anomalous physics going on when we see some anomalies. I'm more inclined to think that there's clearly some clever engineering, at least. Let's start there. So, what are UAP? This is a horribly misused phrase. It's unidentified as ambiguous. Phenomenon's ambiguous. It's used to suggest that we do not at all know what these things are. Some of these things are observed very well and described very well. It can't just be anything because it's unidentified. That's unreasonable. And it's complicated because UAP are a class of phenomena. They're not a single thing. And the taxa are unknown at this point. We don't know what kind of unknown things are out there. And we should expect there to be a lot of confusion when we really start digging in and studying this. There's going to be a conflation of hypotheses. We're going to confuse one type of thing with another. Just like people who are unfamiliar with birds might confuse a hummingbird with a hawk moth, which looks very similar. And they're very different things. So I have a recommended strategy that to reduce probability of error, we need multiple independent, disparate pieces of evidence. We'll model this after multi-messenger astronomy. We have many different instruments, many imaging modalities, multiple observation points, and multiple independent observing groups. We've already seen examples of this from the talks by Avi and Beatrix. And we need to divide and conquer the extraordinary hypotheses. You can handle this by focusing on less controversial aspects of one of these hypotheses and drilling down and slowly getting to that point. And then we need to remain agnostic with respect to the hypotheses. Keep them on the table, and let's focus on characteristics. What characteristics are we observing? What is the phenomenology? Especially those characteristics that have implications, relevant implications for particular hypotheses. That's helpful. So I'm going to talk a good bit today mostly about characteristics of UAPs related to physics. We have from the ATIP program, we have the 5 observables, 5 plus 1 really. Positive lift, sudden and instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocity without signatures, transmedium travel, low observability or cloaking, and biological effects. And I'm going to start out by talking about pretty much the first 3 all in one shot. And Garry mentioned the first paper that I wrote on this. I was interested in looking at some of these new cases, especially the Nimitz encounter. And I found it fascinating that, my graphics isn't quite working here. I found it fascinating that these things these tic-tac shaped objects were observed to drop from about 28,000 feet to sea level in 0.78 seconds. That is crazy. And and really anomalous. How anomalous? Do the math, do the calculations. This is actually, I've criticized other physicists who've said, well, the analysis was rather simple. And my response to this was like, yes, you should have done it. Your students could have done it. And in fact, there was a class in Georgia, a high school class in Georgia, high school physics class that used this paper as an example on how you can make estimates of kinematics. So if you look at this, you can estimate the minimum acceleration, which comes about from the object would have accelerated halfway and then decelerated the other half of the way. That gives you a lower bound for the acceleration, which comes out to be around 5,000 Gs, 5,000 times the acceleration of gravity. No, people aren't going to survive this. Most equipment won't survive this. An F-35's wings will rip off at about 13 Gs.
Tim Galledet is a retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral and former oceanographer who collaborates with the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, or SCU, an organization focused on the scientific investigation of UAP. Through his connections in the military and intelligence communities, Galledet is aware of individuals with knowledge of legacy UAP programs. He also had a UAP experience himself, with people deleting some of his own files and emails. He has spoken about the Schumer Amendment as well, which is basically saying that non-human intelligence exists and is here, and the government knows about it. And it wants to declassify everything, including crafts and bodies. This is Tim Galledet.
I'll be clear again, it's worth me saying this. I am okay with us not acknowledging really important programs for national security. Unacknowledged programs are good for our nation. I just think that the fact that we're not letting the public and Congress know that we're being visited by entities whose intentions we don't understand and characteristics and nature we don't understand, that genie's out of the bottle. I think you know the Schumer Amendment. This is what was drafted last year and was almost passed, including words like technology of unknown origin, non-human intelligence, and what was the UAP. All of those are in that bill multiple times, that draft. And the fact that that got into draft legislation means it's there. There's something there. And we know that because I know some of the people who briefed the Hill. And even though it wasn't passed in the final NDA, most of that stuff was stripped out. Like I said, it's out there now. We have to reconcile this and really inform our public to do the right thing for our nation's security.
Do you think we've had communications with non-human intelligence?
I'm sure of it.
Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader from New York, has been serving in the Senate since 1999. As a member of the Democratic Party, Schumer became the Senate Majority Leader in 2021. He has a long history in politics, having previously served in the U.S. House of Representatives and as a New York State Assemblyman. Schumer has been involved in many key legislative areas, including healthcare, immigration reform, and technology. Mike Rounds. Mike Rounds is a U.S. Senator from South Dakota, serving since 2015, a Republican. He was the governor of South Dakota from 2003 to 2011. Rounds has a background in business and real estate and focuses on issues such as defense, agriculture, and veterans, and veteran affairs during his time in office. Both Schumer and Rounds have been involved in pushing for the UAP Disclosure Act, which wants to increase transparency about government knowledge on unidentified anomalous phenomena, such as crafts, bodies, and any tech they may have. This is Chuck Schumer and Mike Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I see my friend, Senator Rounds, is on the floor, and ask him to engage in a colloquy on an important set of provisions in the NDAA that deals with transparency, trust, and government oversight. The Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act that he and I co-sponsored, and portions of which we will pass in the NDAA. I say to my friend that unidentified unanimous phenomena are of immense interest and curiosity to the American people. But with that curiosity comes the risk for confusion, disinformation, and mistrust, especially if the government isn't prepared to be transparent. The United States government has gathered a great deal of information about UAPs over many decades, but has refused to share it with the American people. That is wrong, and additionally, it breeds mistrust. We've also been notified by multiple credible sources that information on UAPs has also been withheld from Congress, which, if true, is a violation of the laws requiring full notification to the legislative branch, especially as it relates to the 4 congressional leaders, the defense committees, and the Intelligence Committee. So the bill I worked on with Senator Rounds offered a common-sense solution. Let's increase transparency on UAPs by using a model that works, by following what the federal government did 30 years ago with the JFK Assassination Records Collection Act. They established a presidentially appointed board to review and release these records, and it was a huge success. We should do the same here with UAPs. Senator from South Dakota, I yield.
Thank you, and I thank my colleague, the Democrat leader, for the opportunity to speak to this particular issue today. This is an issue that I think has caught the attention of the American people, and most certainly the lack of transparency on the matter, which is of real interest to a lot of the folks that have watched from the outside. Well, it brings together, I think, a notable parallel in the withholding of information that about items that are in the government's possession regarding, in this particular case, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. That same approach by government in terms of the possible withholding of information brings more questions and more attention to the issue of the assassination. We wanted to take that same approach with regard to how we could dispel myths, misinformation about UAPs, about unidentified flying objects, unidentified objects that simply have come to the attention of the American people. Congress did pass legislation 30 years ago requiring the review and release of all records relating to that historic tragedy, the assassination of John Kennedy, which has led to the release of a great deal of information. The UAP Disclosure Act was closely modeled on the JFK Records Act.
Say to my colleague from South Dakota, who we've worked with as a great team on this issue and many other issues, I might add, it's beyond disappointing that the House has refused to work with us on all the important elements of the UAP Disclosure Act during the NDAA conference. But nevertheless, we did make important progress. For the first time, the National Archives will gather records from across the federal government on UAPs and have a legal mandate to release those records to the public if appropriate. This is a major, major win for government transparency on UAPs, and it gives us a strong foundation for more action in the future.
I agree, sir, and I think probably the most significant shortcomings that I think we need to visit about as well, shortcomings of the Conference Committee agreement that are now being voted on, were the rejection, first of all, of a government-wide review board composed of expert citizens, presidentially appointed and Senate confirmed, to control the process of reviewing the records and recommending to the president what records should be released immediately or postponed, and a requirement as a transparency measure for the government to obtain any recovered UAP material or biological remains that may have been provided to private entities in the past and thereby hidden from Congress and the American people. We are lacking oversight opportunities, and we are not fulfilling our responsibilities.
Well, I'd like to echo what my friend Senator Rounds has said today and on many occasions. It's essential we keep working on our proposal to create an independent presidentially appointed review board that can oversee UAP classified records and create a system for releasing them where appropriate to the public. Again, as the Senator has said, it's the same method used for the JFK records, and it continues to work to this very day. It is really an outrage the House didn't work with us on adopting our proposal for a review board, which, of course, by definition here is bipartisan in the Senate. Now it means that declassification of UAP records will be largely up to the same entities that have blocked, obfuscated their disclosure for decades. We will keep working. I want to assure the American people, Senator Rounds and I will keep working to change the status quo. And before I yield finally to him, I'd like to just acknowledge my dear friend, the late Harry Reid, a mentor who cared about this issue a great deal. So he's looking down and smiling on us, but he's also importuning us to get the rest of this done, which we will do everything we can to make happen.
I agree with my friend and colleague. To those who think that the Citizen Review Board that would have been created in our UAP Disclosure Act, that it would be unprecedented and somehow it would go too far, we note that the proposed review board was very closely modeled on the review board established in the JFK Assassination Records Act of 1992, which has successfully guided the release of records to the American public on another very sensitive matter of high interest to the American people. And it does one more thing that we really need to recognize, and that is that there is, we believe, information and data that has been collected by more than just the Department of Defense, but by other agencies of the federal government as well. And by allowing for an outside independent collection of these records, we can make progress in terms of dispelling myths and providing accurate information to the American people.